The morning room at Whitmore Hall was the kind of room that kept its secrets in its surfaces. Ink marks on the desk that no amount of scrubbing had removed. A window latch that needed lifting at a precise angle. A chair by the south wall whose cushion had been turned twice and was wearing through again. Charlotte Fielding knew every inch of it. She had been sitting in this room, at this desk, since she was 16 years old. And in 10 years she had come to understand that the world beyond the door was managed from here. Tenant correspondence, quarterly accounts, the social calendar that kept her father's modest baronetcy appearing more prosperous than it was. This Tuesday, the 2nd of December, she was working through the dairy figures when the door opened without a knock, and her younger sister walked in wearing blue silk at 2:30 in the afternoon, and the morning room became the most dangerous place Charlotte had ever occupied. Philippa closed the door behind her. She was still wearing the gown from the Marchmont ball, hair unpinned, color high, the expression of a woman who has been holding a triumph in her hands for hours and has finally found the correct audience for it. She crossed the room without sitting down and stood over the desk. "He kissed me last night," Philippa said. Charlotte's quill paused. One drop of ink swelled at the nib and held. "At the Marchmont ball," Philippa continued, "in the Conservatory. He kissed me and it was everything. He is going to propose. Everyone expects it. Everyone has always expected it. And I wanted you to know, before it becomes official. Because you have been very helpful with the social calendar, Charlotte. And I want you to understand that your work is appreciated." Charlotte looked up. She read her sister the way she read accounts, methodically, without sentiment. Looking for where the numbers did not add up, she saw the triumph, and beneath it, the cruelty, and beneath that, the absolute certainty of a woman who has never in her life been told she was wrong about something she wanted. Charlotte almost smiled. It was not warmth. It was the involuntary expression of a woman who has been dealt a hand she did not expect, and is calculating very rapidly indeed. "He proposed to me this morning," Charlotte said. Philippa's smile held for 2 seconds. Then it did not hold. What? "Lord Ravenswood came to the house at 9 o'clock. I was in this room, as I am every morning." Charlotte set the quill down with a small, precise click. "He sat in that chair." She pointed to the chair by the window. Worn cushion, the one that needed reupholstering. The one where Julian had sat 4 hours ago with his long legs crossed at the ankle and his hat in his hands. "He proposed. I accepted. That is not possible. The ring is in my desk drawer. I have not put it on because we intended to tell Father together this evening. You have made that unnecessary." Philippa's hands came up from her sides and then had nowhere to go. "He kissed me." "Yes. He told me. He also told me it felt like performing, that he has been performing for 3 weeks because everyone indicated he should want you, and that this morning he stopped. You stole him." "I was at this desk at 8 o'clock, Charlotte said, and her voice did not rise, did not waver, did not carry anything except the steady precision of a woman stating documented fact. "I did not send for him. I did not arrange the meeting. I was annotating dairy figures. He arrived, he sat in that chair, and he proposed to the woman he found working. If that constitutes theft, then I have been stealing by sitting in my own morning room, which I have occupied every morning for 10 years while you slept until 9. Philippa drew herself up. "I will tell Father. I will tell Lady Loxley. I will tell every family in the county that you manipulated a man who was courting me, that you arranged to be alone with him and extracted a proposal through scheming." "I expect you will," Charlotte said. You will be energetic and convincing, and the county will listen because you are very good at rooms. But I will still be holding a proposal I did not arrange, from a man who chose me after kissing you. That is not a weak position, Philippa." Philippa left. The door slammed. The first ungraceful thing she had done in 10 years, and the sound of it rang through the morning room like a struck bell. Charlotte sat with the silence that followed. The ink drop had fallen while she was talking, a small black circle on the dairy figures, precisely on the number she had been about to annotate. She picked up the quill. Her hand was steady. She wrote the next figure and the one after, and she did not stop until the column was complete. Then she opened the desk drawer. The ring was there, sapphire, modest in its setting, the color of the sky at the moment just before a storm breaks. Julian had asked what stone she preferred, and she had said something that works with ink stains, and he had laughed. Not the social laugh she had heard him deploy at dinners for 3 weeks, but the real one, shorter and less polished and entirely without performance. She looked at the ring for a long moment. She did not put it on. She closed the drawer. In the margin beside the dairy figures, she wrote, "Yield steady. Linen order pending. Everything else uncertain." Then she returned to work. 3 days earlier, on Saturday evening, the Marchmont ball had been everything a winter ball was expected to be. Candles, music, 100 people performing their best versions of themselves in a room that smelled of beeswax and powder and the particular anxiety of the county's unmarried daughters. Charlotte had spent the first hour of it at the edge of the supper room, managing. Her father's social commitments required tracking. The Hendersons had to be declined gracefully for their house party without causing offense. The Marchmont daughters needed to be acknowledged in the correct order of precedence. And Sir Edmund himself had a habit of agreeing to things in conversation that Charlotte then had to quietly undo. She was good at it. She had been good at it for years. She moved through the margins of the room with her small notebook and her steady attention, and nobody looked at her, because Philippa was on the floor. Philippa danced with Lord Ravenswood twice in the first set. The room tracked them. The Golden Girl and the Earl, the expected match. The arrangement that everyone had decided upon before either of them had spoken a word to each other. Charlotte watched from beside the refreshment table and noted the time of the supper interval in her notebook. She was refastening her father's cravat. Sir Edmund had managed to loosen the knot simply by turning his head too sharply, which was characteristic. When a voice came from her left. "May I?" Julian Ravenswood was standing close enough that his forearm crossed her line of vision as he reached for the cravat ends. She went still. He took the linen from her hands, not touching her fingers, and retied the knot with the efficient ease of a man who has dressed himself for 30 years. Sir Edmund submitted to this with the placid cooperation of a man who has long since delegated his appearance to whoever is nearest. When it was done, Julian stepped back, and Charlotte was aware of the precise distance between them in a way she had not been aware of anything all evening. "Thank you," she said, because it was true, and because she had been raised to say so. "You are not dancing," Julian said. "I am working. Someone must ensure my father does not commit us to the Henderson house party before I can prevent it. Do you ever stop managing? Do you ever stop performing?" He looked at her then, not the social look, the one calibrated for rooms, but something less practiced. "That is a fair question," he said. It was not intended as an insult. It was observation. "I know," he said. "That is what made it land." They stood beside each other for a moment longer than was necessary, and then Sir Edmund was claimed by Mr. Marchmont and led away, and Charlotte noted in her notebook that the Henderson matter remained unresolved, and the music began again. Later, near the end of the evening, when the candles had burned lower and the room had grown warm and slightly careless, Philippa led Julian toward the conservatory alcove at the far end of the ballroom. Charlotte did not watch. She was speaking with Mrs. Marchmont about the linen supplier in Bury St. Edmunds. But she was aware of the direction they had gone, the way one is aware of a door closing in another room. What happened in the conservatory took less than a minute. Philippa kissed Julian with the confidence of a woman who has never been refused anything she reached for. Julian kissed her back, 4 seconds, perhaps 5, and then stepped away. The space he put between them was not large. It was precise. Philippa read his stillness as modesty, as the restraint of a man observing propriety, and she was satisfied. Julian stood in the conservatory alcove with the smell of forced hyacinths around him and felt nothing that he recognized as desire, and a great deal that he recognized as obligation. And the distinction between the two had never been so clear. The following morning, he rode to Whitmore at 9 o'clock, and Charlotte was at her desk. She was annotating the household accounts, the East Field drainage calculation, a column of figures she had been working through for a week, the numbers stubborn and the solution not yet obvious. She did not look up immediately when he came in, because she had not expected him, and because the figure she was carrying required her full attention for 4 more seconds. When she did look up, he was standing in the doorway with his hat in his hand and an expression she had not seen on him before. Stripped of its usual management, uncertain in a way that was not unbecoming. "Sit down," she said, because he looked as though he might stand in the doorway indefinitely. He sat in the chair by the window. "I believe," he said, "that I have been courting the wrong sister for 3 weeks. Charlotte set down her quill. "I believe you have been courting the sister everyone told you to court," she said. "That is a different problem. Would you allow me to correct it?" She looked at him steadily. "Correcting it requires disappointing my father, offending my sister, and contradicting 3 weeks of public expectation that you yourself have done nothing to discourage. Before I answer, I want to know whether you are proposing or whether you are feeling contrarian after a ball." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I corrected my Blackstone citation because you showed me I was wrong. I spent 2 hours on the bridle path last Wednesday because you were explaining drainage, and I could not find a reason to stop listening. I have been in this county for 3 weeks, and the only conversations I have had that I can remember word for word were with you. That is not contrariness. That is a pattern I failed to read in time." Charlotte looked at the window. The January light was flat and gray and honest, and it suited the room, which had not been redecorated in 12 years, and showed it. "I will accept," she said, "on the condition that we tell my father together this evening. Not after. This evening." "This evening," Julian agreed. They did not get the chance. Philippa had seen his horse at the gate that morning and had watched Charlotte's face on the stairs when she came up. The particular stillness of a woman carrying a secret she cannot yet speak. And by the time the afternoon was half done, Philippa had drawn her own conclusions and gone to find her ammunition. Philippa went directly to Lady Loxley. Lady Loxley's house was 3 miles from Whitmore, and her drawing room was the county's most reliable instrument for the distribution of opinion. She received Philippa at 4 o'clock and listened with the attentiveness of a woman who understands that information is a resource. Philippa's account was direct. Charlotte had thrown herself at Lord Ravenswood. Charlotte had arranged to be alone with him. Charlotte had extracted a proposal through manipulation, while Philippa, the woman he had been courting, the woman he had kissed, was given no opportunity to respond. By the time Philippa left, Lady Loxley had formed a view. Charlotte's invitation to the winter ball at Loxley House was withdrawn the following morning. A note arrived at breakfast, written in Lady Loxley's precise copperplate, citing a regrettable reduction in numbers due to unforeseen circumstances. Charlotte read it twice, set it beside her teacup, and finished her toast. By Tuesday evening, when Philippa had already delivered her news in the morning room, the county had begun to divide. Those who believed the dazzling sister and those who were prepared to wait. Sir Edmund, confronted with the conflict between his daughters at dinner, retreated to his study and did not emerge. Charlotte gave him one day. On Wednesday afternoon, she knocked at the study door. "Father," she said, standing in the doorway, "I need you to act. I need to think, Charlotte. You have been thinking for 2 days. Thinking is not the same as choosing, and choosing is what is required. This is a matter of some. My reputation is being dismantled publicly by my sister, and the man who proposed to me is waiting to know whether his proposal will be acknowledged by this family or not. That is the matter. It is not complicated." Sir Edmund looked at the books on his desk, which he was not reading. "I assumed Philippa and Ravenswood seemed. You assumed the obvious arrangement was the correct one. So did everyone. That is not a failing unique to you. But the assumption was wrong, and now I need you to say so." He did not answer. Charlotte stood in the doorway for a long moment, long enough to make clear she was waiting. And then she understood that he would not answer today, and perhaps not tomorrow, and that she was going to have to proceed without him. She walked back to her desk and picked up her quill. Julian came to Whitmore that afternoon, having heard that the ball invitation had been withdrawn. He found Charlotte in the morning room, and she told him before he could speak. "I know about the invitation," she said. "I will write to Lady Loxley. I will make clear that the withdrawal was based on a misrepresentation." "Do not write," Charlotte said. "Writing is calibrated. A letter from you to Lady Loxley costs you nothing. She will read it as management, which is what you have been doing for 3 weeks. If you intend to act, you must act in a place where it costs you something." "What would cost me something?" Charlotte looked at him directly. "Saying in public what you said to me in private. Not defending me, confessing. Confessing that you courted the wrong woman because you followed directions and that the proposal was yours and not extracted. There is a difference between defense and confession, and the room will hear it." He was quiet for a moment. "At the ball." "At the ball, if we are still invited to the ball." 6 days before the winter ball, Lady Loxley hosted a morning call. 3 other county women were present. Mrs. Hartwell, whose opinion moved in whatever direction the room inclined. Mrs. Fay, who was genuinely uncertain. And Miss Dorothea Stanhope, who was 22 and watching everything with the intensity of a woman taking notes for future use. Philippa arrived first. Charlotte arrived 5 minutes later, having been told by a third party that the call was occurring and having decided to attend. Philippa did not wait long. When the second round of tea had been poured and Lady Loxley had made the expected remarks about the weather and the roads, Philippa turned to Charlotte and stated her case before the assembled company. "You were alone with him," Philippa said. "You arranged the meeting. You have been placing yourself in his path since the first week of November, and everyone in this room knows it." Charlotte set down her teacup without sound. "I am alone in the morning room, every morning at 8 o'clock, she said. "That is not arrangement. That is routine." I have maintained that routine for 6 years, because the accounts and the correspondence require it. Lord Ravenswood came to Whitmore Hall at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and found me at my desk. I did not send for him. I did not know he was coming. I was calculating the Eastfield drainage, which I have been trying to resolve since October. You expect us to believe. I expect nothing, Charlotte said. I am telling you what occurred. She turned slightly toward the door. Mrs. Briggs. The Whitmore housekeeper entered. She had been in service at Whitmore Hall for 20 years, and she had the bearing of a woman who has seen a great deal and is not easily moved by any of it. She stood in the center of the room with her hands folded and waited. Mrs. Briggs, Charlotte said, will you tell Lady Loxley how long I've kept my morning hours at the household desk? Miss Charlotte has been at that desk every morning at 8 o'clock for 6 years, Mrs. Briggs said. Without exception, saving the week her mother died. If Lord Ravenswood found her there on a Monday morning, it is because she was working. That is where she works. That is where she has always worked. The room absorbed this. Lady Loxley did not rule publicly in Charlotte's favor. That was not how Lady Loxley operated. But she did not expel Charlotte, and she did not confirm Philippa's version. And the quiet she maintained was the closest thing to neutrality she was capable of offering. The 3 witnesses arranged themselves in their chairs with the careful expressions of people who have heard 2 versions of a story and are not yet certain which one to carry home. Philippa's accusation stood. Charlotte stood alongside it. The county had now heard both versions in the same room, and it would choose. The package arrived in Charlotte's Morning Post 2 days later, a bundle of papers tied with household string, Julian's personal accounts for the Ravenswood estate, annotated in his own hand. The accompanying note was brief. I thought you might need occupation while the county decides its opinion. She untied the string and began to read. His margins were a disaster. Numbers crossed out and rewritten, calculations abandoned mid-column, entries that contradicted each other across pages. He was a genuinely poor accountant. The chaos of it was honest in a way that his social presentation had never been. And she found herself sitting with the pages for 2 hours, annotating corrections in her own hand, writing explanatory notes in the margins beside his crossed-out attempts. She finished the Garfield tenancy page last, because she had a great deal to say about the Garfield tenancy, and returned the corrected accounts by messenger that afternoon. The following morning, she was riding the bridle path between Whitmore and Ravenswood when Julian came alongside her from the Ravenswood gate. January had settled hard over the valley, and the horse breath rose in small clouds, and the hedgerow was bare and precise against the white sky. My sister told Lady Loxley you were confused, Charlotte said, when he had drawn level. Were you confused? Julian asked. I was asking whether you were. I was confused for 3 weeks, he said. I have not been confused since 9 o'clock last Tuesday. He reached across the gap between the horses and adjusted her coat collar, which had turned in the wind. His gloved fingers were brief and sure at her neck. Your collar, he said. I know. I left it. Deliberately. I wanted to see whether you would fix it or merely mention it. I fixed it. Charlotte pulled her horse slightly ahead on the path. I noticed, she said. 3 days later, Philippa appeared at the Ravenswood gates, on foot, having walked from Whitmore in the cold with the determined stride of a woman who has been composing her argument for 2 miles. Julian came out to meet her at the gate, which was the least she deserved. You spent 3 weeks with me, Philippa said. You danced with me. You called on me. You kissed me. And you expect me to believe that one morning sitting across from my sister erased all of it? 3 weeks of performing erased itself, Julian said. One morning of honesty replaced it. I am sorry for the 3 weeks. I am not sorry for the morning. You will regret this. When the county has finished forming its opinion and you understand what you have walked into. I have regretted everything I did from habit, Julian said. I do not intend to regret the first thing I did from choice. Philippa looked at him for a long moment, and the fury in her face was real and not unearned, and he did not look away from it. Then she turned and walked back toward Whitmore, and he stood at the gate until she was out of sight. Sir Edmund remained in his study. Charlotte did not knock again. Instead, she wrote to Mrs. Briggs's cousin in Berry Street. Edmund's about the linen order. She resolved the Henderson House party question through a letter to Mrs. Henderson that was kind and final. And she worked through the dairy figures and the kitchen garden accounts and the Eastfield drainage calculation, which she had finally solved on paper, even if the ground remained frozen. She moved through the house with the steady competence of a woman who has understood for some time that she is the engine, and that engines do not stop because no one has thanked them. Philippa found her alone in the morning room on Thursday evening. You have taken everything, Philippa said. She was not shouting. The quietness was worse. Charlotte put down the linen ledger. I have taken nothing, she said. I was here, Philippa. Every morning at 8. Every evening with the accounts. Every dinner managing the table, the guests. Father's commitments, your correspondence when you asked me to handle it. I was here for 10 years. You never looked. That is not... He was not yours to lose, Charlotte said. And here her voice changed, not louder, but different in quality. Stripped of its usual dry precision and carrying something that had been held in place for a very long time. He was mine to find. I was never jealous of you. I watched you receive everything, and I was not jealous, because jealousy requires wanting something for yourself. And I had spent 10 years learning not to want things for myself. The proposal frightened me because I wanted it, not because of you. Because I had forgotten how. Philippa was silent. You never noticed, Charlotte said, because invisible people do not compete. They are simply there every morning at 8, holding the house together while you sleep. Philippa left without answering. The door closed quietly this time, which was somehow harder to bear than the slam. That evening, Julian came to Whitmore. Charlotte was in her room sewing the gown she intended to wear to the ball. The dressmaker in the village charged 4 guineas for a commission, and the roof fund was short by precisely that amount. And Charlotte had her mother's sewing box and 10 years of practice hemming household linens. She was working by lamplight, the fabric spread across her knees, when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside her door, and then stillness. I know you are there, she said. I suspected as much, Julian said from the other side of the door. The dressmaker costs 4 guineas. The roof fund is short. Do not offer to pay for it. I will walk into that ballroom in a gown I made with my own hands, and that will be the truest thing in the room. A pause. May I sit in the corridor? Why? Because I would like to be near the sound of someone working. She heard him settle against the wall, the particular sound of a man sitting down on a hard floor with more resignation than grace. She returned to the hem, which was crooked on the left side and would need to be unpicked and reset. The needle moved. The lamp held steady. 20 minutes passed in a silence that was not uncomfortable, separated by 2 inches of oak. She opened the door to fetch her scissors from the window ledge and found him sitting against the wall with his eyes closed, his long legs stretched across the corridor, looking more at ease than she had ever seen him in a drawing room. He opened his eyes when the light fell across him and looked up at her. "The hem is crooked," he said. "I know. I'm going to fix it." She took the scissors. She looked at him for a moment, at the man sitting on her corridor floor at 9 o'clock in the evening because he had asked to be near the sound of someone working, and then she closed the door. Not all the way. The gap stayed, 2 inches of lamplight falling into the dark corridor. He stayed. The following morning, Julian wrote to Lady Loxley. The letter was brief. If Miss Charlotte Fielding was not welcome at the winter ball at Loxley House, then neither was he. The invitation was reinstated by afternoon post. The night before the ball, Charlotte finished the gown. The hem was corrected, the cut was precise. The fabric was simpler than anything Philippa would wear, and better made than most things Charlotte had owned. She laid it across the chair in her room and opened the desk drawer. The ring was where it had been since Tuesday morning. She had not worn it. Wearing it without her father's acknowledgement had felt like a claim made before the ground was solid. She looked at it in the drawer for a moment, the sapphire dark in the lamplight. A knock came at her door. Sir Edmund entered, which was the first time in 4 days he had been in any room that Charlotte occupied. He looked at the gown on the chair. He looked at his elder daughter standing beside the desk. He was a man who had spent 4 days thinking and had arrived at something that was not a conclusion so much as a recognition. "Ravenswood is acceptable," he said. "Unexpected, but acceptable. I had assumed—" He stopped. "I had assumed the obvious arrangement was the correct one." "Everyone did," Charlotte said. "The girl who runs this house," Sir Edmund said slowly, as though testing the phrase, "is perhaps the girl who knows what she wants." He looked at her for a moment, not at which daughter she was, not in comparison to anyone else, but at her. Then he nodded once and left, and his footsteps went back down the corridor toward his study. Charlotte stood in the room alone for a moment. Then she took the ring from the drawer and put it on. The sapphire caught the lamplight and held it. She did not go back to the accounts. She sat in the chair beside the gown she had made herself and looked at the ring in the light until the lamp began to gutter, and she was still sitting there when it went out. The winter ball at Loxley House was everything the Marchmont ball had been, and the room knew it was not only a ball. The county had been watching the story for 10 days and had come to see how it ended. Charlotte entered in the gown she had made. Simpler fabric than half the women present, the cut more precise than most. Sir Edmund entered behind her, which was itself a statement he had not planned to make and made anyway. The room registered both of them. Julian was across the ballroom when she arrived. He saw her the moment she entered, and he crossed the floor toward her, not toward Philippa, who was standing with Mrs. Hartwell near the windows, but toward Charlotte, directly and without hesitation. And 30 people tracked his movement with the attention of an audience that has been waiting for the third act. He reached her near the wall. She had positioned herself at the edge of the room from long habit, and he came to her there and stood beside her rather than before her. "Miss Charlotte," he said, "I have been asked tonight by 4 separate people whether I was manipulated into proposing to you. I would like to answer them. May I? You are asking my permission to make a spectacle of the both of us. I am asking your permission to confess something publicly. If you prefer I do it in a corridor, I will do it in a corridor." Charlotte looked at him for a moment. "Say it badly," she said. "If you say it well, the room will assume you rehearsed it." He turned to face the room. He stayed beside her, did not move to the center, did not claim the floor, but turned so that the room could see him and hear him, and Charlotte remained at his shoulder. "Oh, 3 weeks ago, Julian said, and his voice was not the polished instrument he used at dinners, but something rougher and less managed. I arrived in this county and was directed toward Miss Philippa Fielding. She is beautiful and accomplished, and everything a man of my position is told to want. I courted her. I danced with her. I kissed her. I did everything I was expected to do. He paused. The following morning I rode to Whitmore Hall at 9 o'clock and found Miss Charlotte Fielding at her desk, annotating household accounts in a morning room that wants repainting, in a house she has been running for 10 years, while every person in this county, including me, was looking at her sister. The room was still. Not politely still, genuinely still, the stillness of people who have stopped performing their own evening. I proposed to Miss Charlotte, Julian continued, because 3 weeks earlier she corrected a misquotation of Blackstone I made at dinner and showed me precisely where I was wrong. Because she explained the drainage problem on the East Field with more clarity than my land agent has managed in 3 years of trying. Because she handed me her father's annotated Virgil and said the margins were better than the text. And she was right. And I had never thought to look at the margins before. He stopped for a moment. Because when I am in a room with her, I do not perform. I have been performing my entire life. She is the first person who made that feel like something I might be able to stop. He did not look at Philippa. He did not look at Lady Loxley. He looked at the middle distance of the room, the way a man looks when he is confessing rather than presenting. The kiss happened, he said. That was my failing. I kissed a woman I was expected to kiss and felt nothing. And I should have understood then what that meant. The proposal happened because I stopped following directions and paid attention to what I could actually see. If that is manipulation, then I accept the charge. I have been manipulated by competence and honesty, and I find I am not sorry. Lady Loxley began to applaud. It was not warm applause. It was the applause of a woman who understands that the room has shifted and that she will serve herself better by leading the shift than by resisting it. The sound spread. Sir Edmund, standing in the corner near the door, watched his elder daughter standing in the center of a room she had always occupied from the edges. He did not move. He did not speak, but he was there. And Charlotte, who had been standing beside Julian with her hands at her sides through the entire declaration, saw her father's face and understood that his presence was the thing he had to offer, and that he had offered it. Her hand found Julian's. Not dramatically. The practical grip of a woman who has managed things for long enough to know when to hold on. That was badly said, she told him. You instructed me to say it badly. I did. It was honest. Several minutes later, she followed him out of the ballroom into the corridor beyond, where the candles were fewer and the music was muffled, and there was no audience. She reached up and took both ends of his cravat in her hands. She pulled, not gently, not tentatively, but with the decision of a woman who has spent 10 years moving carefully and has chosen, in this moment, to stop. He came forward. She kissed him. When they separated, she was still holding the cravat, and the corridor was very quiet, and the music from the ballroom continued on the other side of the door, as though nothing of any importance had occurred. That was your cravat, Julian said. It was crooked. It was not crooked. I know, Charlotte said. I was testing whether you would fix it or mention it. He looked at her steadily. You fixed it. She held his gaze. I noticed, she said. 2 days after the ball, the Whitmore morning room. 8 o'clock. The winter light through the south window, thin and white and honest, falling across the desk where Charlotte was beginning the morning's work. Julian sat across from her in the chair by the window. The worn cushion, the chair that had become his in the way that things become yours when you sit in them with sufficient intention. "Your sister has not spoken to you," he said. "No. Philippa does not sustain fury. She sustains disappointment, which is a different thing and takes longer to pass. The fury will be gone by Sunday. The disappointment will take until spring, at least." "Your father?" Charlotte dipped her quill. "He came to my room the night before the ball. He said you were acceptable, if unexpected. He also said that the girl who runs this house is perhaps the girl who knows what she wants." She wrote the date at the top of the page. "It is the first time in my life he has described me by what I do, rather than by which sister I am." Julian reached across and took the quill from her hand. He examined it with the expression of a man confronting evidence of a problem he should have addressed sooner. "This quill is terrible. I have been using it for 4 months. New quills cost 3 shillings, and the roof fund was short." He produced a flat wooden box from his coat. Inside, nestled in cloth, were 6 steel-nibbed quills, the parliamentary clerk's kind, made for volume and precision. I asked my secretary what he uses for correspondence that must be legible across 30 pages. He gave me these. Charlotte picked one up and tested the nib against her thumbnail. The flex was perfect, firm and responsive, not scratchy, not soft. She turned it in the light. "These are expensive. They are efficient. Your margin notes deserve a nib that does not skip and blur. You have read my margin notes. 3 years of household accounts. Your notes are better than the figures." He leaned forward slightly. "The Garfield tenancy. You wrote, 'G requests reduction annually.' The request is grief, not economy. He lost his wife in the flood of 1819. Decline with sympathy." He paused. "That is not accounting. That is care. Those are not the same thing, and most people who manage accounts do not know the difference." Charlotte held the new quill, dipped it, and wrote the date again at the top of a fresh page. The ink flowed without hesitation, clean and dark and even, the way good tools work when they are correctly matched to their purpose. "Monday," she said. "I want your opinion on the Eastfield drainage plan, the recalculation I did in January. I want to discuss it before we speak to the land agent. My opinion on drainage is entirely uninformed. Then I will inform it. That is what I do." Spring came slowly to the valley between Whitmore and Ravenswood, the January frost yielding by degrees to a pale March warmth, the hedgerows greening along the bridle path as the ground softened. Charlotte and Julian rode the path every morning now, the half-mile between 2 estates where the valley opened or neither of them was required to be anything other than what they were. On a morning in late March, Charlotte brought the Eastfield results. The drainage she had redesigned on paper through the winter, that Julian had funded in February without being asked, simply by instructing his land agent to proceed on her specification, was working. The field was dry where it had been waterlogged. At the lower gate, Mr. Garfield was mending a fence post and looked up when they passed and raised his hand. "The gradient was the problem," Charlotte said, drawing level with the gate. 2 inches over 40 yards. I recalculated in January after I found the original survey was using the wrong baseline. 2 inches saved his spring planting, Julian said. 2 inches and a woman with a quill and enough time to read a surveyor's report from 1817. Do not romanticize drainage, Julian. "I am not romanticizing drainage," he said. "I am romanticizing the woman who understands it." She pulled her horse ahead by 3 lengths. He followed. She slowed at the stile where the path crossed from Whitmore land to Ravenswood. And they stopped in the morning light, the horses standing side by side, the valley spread below them with Garfield's field green and unflooded for the first time in 4 years. "Philippa came to my desk yesterday," Charlotte said. "And?" "She needed the linen ledger. The supplier had sent the wrong count, and she needed to check the original order against the delivery note." Charlotte adjusted her glove. The sapphire caught the light. Ink-colored, work-colored, the stone Julian had chosen because she had told him what she needed. She found a small error in my figures while she was looking. A transposition in the February column. She returned the ledger by 11 o'clock, as I asked, with the correction marked. "Your sister found a mistake in your accounts. A small one. She was looking very carefully. That is how it begins. Someone looks hard enough to find something they can usefully offer." Charlotte looked out at the valley. "It is not forgiveness. It is not yet. But it is a start." Julian reached across the gap between the horses. His gloved hand found her collar, which had turned in the wind at some point on the path, the same fold she had allowed to remain uncorrected every morning for weeks now. He straightened it, the same brief, sure gesture, his fingers at her neck. "Your collar," he said. "I know. I left it." His voice was quiet. Again. "I am testing your consistency," Charlotte said. 10 years of data is a more reliable sample than 3 months. They rode on, 2 horses on the path between 2 estates, the drainage working as designed, the accounts in balance, the margins of every ledger in the morning room, filling with the careful notes of a woman who had spent 10 years being the engine of a house, and had discovered, in the end, that engines do not have to run alone. The hedgerow was green on both sides of the path. The valley between Whitmore and Ravenswood was the same valley it had always been. It looked, in the March light, like something that had been there waiting. Not for anyone to claim it, but for someone to finally see it clearly enough to call it home.